The year is 1966. 14-year-old Mark Goldsmith is at the South Australian Mallala circuit watching Australia's first CanAm style sports car, the Globe Products Elfin 400 Cobra, which thunders around the track, leaving a lasting impression on him. In 1966, the FIA revised its regulations for its race categories all over the world. One of the new race groups was Group 7 two-seater sports cars. Rules were limited to fenders or wheel covering bodywork, a windshield, two doors and seats, a roll bar, and utilised commercial fuel. These rules formed the basis for the famous and well-known North American CanAm series, the European Inter-Series series, and the early Japanese Grand Prix races. However, a year earlier, Australia had implemented its own Group 7 style rules in the form of the new Group A sports car category. The rules were essentially the same as the FIA Group 7 ones, although Australian cars required headlights, a key start ignition, a horn, and carry a spare wheel, although this last requirement did not last long. By 1966, a 5-litre engine capacity limit had been imposed. Group A sports cars would therefore be the premier sports car category in Australia. The Elfin 400 was the first of these new Australian-built big banger sports cars, and chassis number BB661 was the first of 4 such cars, all of which had different power plants, although chassis BB662 for Frank Matic with a Traco Oldsmobile engine was actually completed first. The BB in the chassis number, although never confirmed, reportedly stood for Big Banger. This particular car was ordered by Dick Bassett, owner of Globe Products, that would go on to produce some of the most famous wheels in Australian motoring, such as the Bathurst Globe and Tirana Sprintmaster wheel. Those wheels were designed and developed by Kevin Drage, an exceptionally clever engineer who was called upon by Bassett to create a unique quad-cam head conversion for the Ford 289 cubic inch V8 intended for the recently ordered Elfin 400. In order to try and solve the weakness of a pushrod engine valve train at high RPMs, Drage designed alloy 4-cam heads with 2 valves per cylinder to go on the Ford V8 bottom end. The new heads would feature a better shaped combustion chamber, improve valve actuation and raise the rev limit of the small block Ford. The first prototype engine was fed by 4 48mm IDA Weber carburetors and produced 366 horsepower on the engine dyno, with very mild camshaft profiles. Slide mechanical fuel injection would later be developed, with power growing to around 420 horsepower. The new Globe Products Elfin was debuted on the 13th of June 1966, with Noel Hurd as the driver and fitted with the standard overhead valve heads, due to the 4-cam heads still being developed. The car proved to be quick, and between 1967 and 1968, Hurd won 4 out of 12 starts, with a further 3 second places with both the traditional pushrod engine and the 4-cam headed engine. Hurd also managed to set lap records at both Cobra and Mallala. However, the premier sports car race, the Australian Tourist Trophy, eluded all 4 of the Elfin 400s. After only a few races, the car's capacity was increased to 302 cubic inches to take it out to the maximum displacement possible under the rules. The 4-cam engine wasn't the only development hurdle for the Globe Elfin. At Longford in 1966, Hurd was travelling around 140 miles an hour when he went up and over the crest of the Longford Hill, the Elfin becoming airborne. After taking out several fence posts, the Elfin came to rest with fairly minimal damage, but more importantly, Hurd was okay. The car was returned to the Elfin factory for repairs, and a new blunt-style nose was installed to reduce front-end lift. Tragically, in 1969 at Bathurst, Bevan Gibson driving another Elfin 400, BB663, powered by a Repco Brabham V8, with the original horn-style nose, became airborne on Conrod Strait, the accident claiming Gibson's life. During the late 1960s, the then controlling body for Australian motorsport, CAMS, flagged a rule change that would only allow production engines for future Group A sports cars. Sadly, that decision stopped further prototype engine development for sports cars. That decision, combined with a loss of interest from Bassett, meant that the Globe Elfin was intended to be put up for sale, with either the 4-cam or pushrod Cobra engine being available. With the car unsold, Bassett decided to lend the car to friend and experienced racer Keith Reelston to run a season on the proviso he refresh both the chassis and the engine. He ran the 400 between 1970 and 1971 before Globe sold it to Adelaidean racer Stan Keane, who ran it between 1971 and 1972. Keane eventually repainted the Elfin yellow and fitted it with large flared rear guards. Towards the end of 1972, the Elfin was bought by Tasmanian Max Thompson, who raced the Elfin successfully at both Baskerville and Symmons Plains for numerous years. In that time, the Elfin bodywork and paint scheme changed considerably. By the mid-1970s, the once curvy Elfin bodywork had been replaced by a squared-off design with a sharp chisel-like nose. At the end of the 1970s, Thompson crashed the car heavily and sold the damaged car to fellow Tasmanian Bert Howard. Howard sent the car back to Elfin for repairs, with the chassis subsequently stiffened and upgraded to the then latest 1980s thinking. The car would remain in the state for the best part of 35 years. During the 1970s, a now grown-up Mark Goldsmith had started competing in rallying, circuit racing, hill climbing and tarmac rallying in various cars. By the early 2000s, Goldsmith had been campaigning an Elfin 622 Formula 2 car in Australia and Europe, but began looking for a historic big banger sports car, similar to the Elfin that had impressed him all those years ago, which was still very vivid in his memory. Various CanAm, McLaren and Lolas were out of Goldsmith's reach, so he began looking within Australia and came across an Elfin 400 for sale. This particular one for sale in Tasmania. As if it was meant to be, Goldsmith found himself looking at the very Elfin 400 Cobra he had seen at Malala some 48 years prior, which had originally ignited his passion for big banger sports cars. Goldsmith bought the Elfin and set about restoring the car back to its original 1966 specification, which required the removal of the added strengthening plates and replacing the new squared-off chassis sides with the original rounded ones. The accuracy of the restoration was made possible by original Elfin fabricators John Webb and Ron Lambert, who took detailed photographs and records in period of each individual car as they were being built. Goldsmith was able to see exactly how his car was built in the mid-1960s and restore it exactly as it had ran in 1966. Obviously, some safety requirements had to be added, including a very substantial roll bar, which Goldsmith finds a bit ugly, but necessary. The only thing missing from the restored Elfin 400 is the super rare Globe 4-cam V8, which hasn't been seen since it was removed from the car in the late 1960s and sold with the plans and casting patterns. Instead, the Elfin features a Ford 302 V8 with traditional heads. The engine is fed by four 48 IDA Webers on a Shelby Cobra intake manifold. This manifold is the original and an early production by Carroll Shelby. Power is around 420 horsepower, which is around what it would have produced in 1966, with weight being around 700 kilos dry. The transaxle is a Hewland LG 500 4-speed which was originally designed for use in CanAm and European endurance racing, and features its own separate oil pump and cooler. The other Elfin 400s used the German-made ZF transaxle, and a year later the lighter Hewland DG300. The stunningly restored Globe Products Elfin is now a regular at historic meetings all over Australia. We are extremely fortunate Mark Goldsmith is so passionate and enthusiastic about keeping Australia's first big banger sports car on track for all to see and appreciate.